I'm going to create exercise 7, and in this exercise, we're going to talk about context API, and also we're going to talk about use context hook and see why are they important and how are they going to be used. In the component, I'm going to create a new folder, a new file. I'm going to call it exercise7.js. So first part of the exercise is going to be example without context. And then the second part is going to be example with context. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing, but in one of them, I'm not going to use context, and in one of them, I'm going to use context. Now, I am going to create a function, and this function, I'm just going to name it component1. And this function, what it's going to do, it's going to receive a prop called text. And then it's going to return an H3, and it's going to display the text in here. Okay. And then I'm going to create another one of these components, and I'm going to name it component2. Component2 is going to receive the same text, and it's going to show the text here. Let each one of these components to check re-render status. And here I'm going to write re-render status. Okay, so now I have component 1 and component 2. They are doing the same thing, but there are just two components. And then we are having another one that is a button. These ones have to be capital as well. Here we're going to have a button, and I'm going to say button without context. And then the prop that this one is going to get is set text, because we want to change the text from this button. And then set text, it's going to return, the return is going to be a button re-render. The name of it is going to be re-render. And so I want to say what's going to happen every time that this button is getting clicked. So on click, I'm going to run the function button clicked. Or let's do button handler. Outside of here, I am going to define what button handler is going to do. So there's a const is going to be equal to a function, and the function is, it's going to take this set text that actually a function, and it's going to, so the props of this button is going to be the function. And then these, and the reason we are using this is because we are using useState. So we are updating the button from useState. We are getting the text from useState. Okay, but right now I am passing the function of useState as a prop to this function. So there is a useState still out there wherever I'm calling this function, and my function is going to have access to it. So, and then I can get the set text from that useState. Okay, and then when I get the set text from the useState, I'm going to change the value to component re-rendered. Here, I'm going to show the re-render status, and I have a button that when I click it, I have a button called re-render. So whenever I click it, it will change the text as the component has re-rendered. Okay, so now I want to export all of these functions, and I want to use them in app.js. All of these three got exported. Now in app.js, I have to receive them. So I'm going to import things that I'm going to receive is component 1, and then I have component 2, and for the button, I have button without context. Is that what it is? Yes. Okay, so now I have imported all of these functions that I need. I am going down here inside of my app.js. And inside of this div, I'm going to create an h2 tag, and I'm going to call this exercise 7. In exercise 7, I want to call these functions that I have created here. Okay, so the first function that I'm going to call is component 1, and then the next one is component 2. Next one is button without context. Okay, so but now if you look here in exercise 7, I said each one of these require a prop from me. So what I have to do is I have to somehow pass a prop to these. I have to pass a prop to these functions. But as we said, these props need to come from a user state, so they would be able to, after the whole page has been rendered. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? First time when I run my application, app.js is getting rendered. So after app.js is getting rendered, if any changes I want to make to this page, it has to be, that component have to be re-rendered. And as you remember, when we were talking about re-render, we said that whenever a prop want to change, it has to go through user state. So it will trigger a re-render. So these props that I'm going to send here, because they're going to be changed whenever the button is pressed. So I need to create a user state here. And my user state have to be accessible from all of these functions. So I am going to create my user state here, const, and I'm going to get text, and I am going to get text, set text, and sorry. This is going to be equal to a user state, the user state. So as we talked about this before, user state, it has two things in its array. The first one is a variable, and the second one is a function that whenever you want to change this variable, you're supposed to use this function in order for it to be tracked by React and in order to trigger a re-render. Here is going to be the initial value of the text. So right now I say no re-render. So the initial value of my text is going to be no re-render. And then whenever I'm calling this button, it's going to take the set text and it's going to say component re-rendered. Okay, so now if I want to run this function and see how it works, I'm going to save this. Set text is not a function. Is not a function? Let's say why. Okay, so sets text here. Oh, I'm very sorry. So right now we're not using context, so I have to pass these props. You see, if I don't pass props, this is the problem. So the first one is receiving a text from us as a prop, and that is going to be the text that's coming from the user state. So this one is going to be the value of this prop. And then we have component 2 that gets the same thing. And then we have this one that is called, the prop is called set text, and this is going to receive set text from our user state. So there's a props called set text, and then it's going to receive the set text from user state. So now that I have my props, I should be able to, in the first render, in the original render, I am going to be able to see this initial value. So it has to be no re-render from this component and this component. And then after I click the button, there has to be a re-render in this page, and these 3 components have to be updated. Well, basically, button will update the set text, and then these 2 texts are going to be different. So now if I save this and then I try to run this again, we see that re-render status is no re-render. So that means that it is coming from user state. And then if I click re-render, you see that this is changed to component re-render. That means that it got set text updated the text to the value that this button is sending. So let's very quickly go over this, and then when we are going to talk about context, you won't get confused. First of all, we created 3 functions. The first function is going to receive a text from us that is a variable, and then it's going to create an H3 and it's going to display that text here. And then the second function is going to again receive a prop called text, and then it's going to display it in the h3 tag. And then I have another function that is a button, and whenever that button is getting clicked, is going to start this function. And then this function is only going to receive this set text, which is a function that is going to be accessible to it, which is a function, like whatever function that is, we're going to pass here. And then it's going to set the value of that function. It's going to pass component rendered to that function. Okay, so in order for this thing to work, we need to first render with the original value, whatever the text value is. So let's go to app.js. Now I have called these two components from the from exercise 7 and the button from exercise 7. What's going to happen here is that originally, when I render this page, because I haven't clicked the button yet, the original value of my user state is going to be no re-render. And then I'm getting this text from user state, and I'm going to pass it as props to component 1 and component 2. And then this set text, which is the function, again, from user state, I'm going to pass it to the button. So this set text is able to change this text. Now React understand that a prop has changed. Now it will do a re-render on the components that their props has changed. Okay. So one of the things about this that you notice, and I actually made the mistake, is that I didn't send the props and it didn't work. But imagine instead of right now I just have 3 components. Imagine if I have like 100 components here, then you have to individually go and write the props for it, which is not the ideal because you're doing it manually. Then you might make a mistake, and it's going to be very hard to figure out where that problem is coming from. It's just not a good practice. And it is called, I believe, what was it called? It was called props drilling. So props drilling is not a good thing to happen. But if you, it's just best practice. It doesn't mean that this is not going to work. It is still going to work. Without context, you're totally able to do all of this. It's just that it is best practice to use context, and you don't need to do so much of these manual stuff. Now we have completed the part without the context. Now I'm going to talk about the part that we have context. The first thing that we're supposed to do here is we have to create an object of the context. Okay, let me see if I imported everything. No, I haven't imported anything. So I'm just going to import it up here. So actually, I'm going to import it inside of the example. So now I have to import a few things here. One of the things that I have to import is useContext. The other one is create context. And the last one is user state. And yes, we still need user state here. And in a second, you know why. The first thing that I'm going to do when I'm going to try to use the context is to create a context object. And everything that I need is going to be inside of this context object because it's a special type of object. So for that, I'm going to create a const. Then you want to name the object. You're going to say text context. Well, yeah, I'm just going to put text context. I was thinking about naming it text object so you understand, or context object so you understand what it is, but text context. It is an object from a context that I named it text context. And then this is coming from create context. So now I have created a text context here. Let me explain it to you this way. What we want to do is to have a tag. For example, there's a provider here. And then this tag, inside of this tag, I have many other tags that they were called children. Okay, so this provider that wraps around these children, and these children can be anything. Like, for example, they can be component 1 that we were using, or things like that. All of these are going to be children in the middle. What's going to happen is, even though something like component 1 and component 2 requires me to pass a prop to them individually, but when I am using context, I don't pass the props individually. Still, these functions need props. Still, they need something from me. They need some information from me, but they are not going to get it in the form of props in front of the function that you're calling or in front of the component that you're calling. But all of that information is going to be available in the provider, which comes from text context. Text context have this provider, and this provider will hold all of the props or all of the values that are necessary for these children or for these tags that are in the middle here, it will provide all of the information that they need. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to create this function and just know that I have to export it as well. So it's going to be, what? Export function. And the function that I'm creating here, I'm going to name it text provider. So this is that special function. So since all the values, all of the props are inside of text provider, we're going to have to be able to, again, we're going to have to be able to track them. And again, we need to be able to re-render. For that reason, we need a user state here. So I'm going to create a constant. And again, I'm going to name it text and set text. And then, so these functions are coming from user state. And the initial value is going to be no re-render from context. Another thing that I have here, so I have this here for tracking it. And then another thing that I have here is I have to call the provider from text context. So it will hold all of these values. So I have text context, and then under this, I have something called provider. Okay, so this special tag is going to receive values from me. Oh, I gotta have to put it in return. Okay, so I'm gonna create a return. Inside of my return, I'm going to create this tag that is coming from text context. So basically it is coming from our object, our context object, and it is called a provider. So this one receives a value. This is all of the props that it needs. So right now, the props that we need is one is text, and the other one is the function setText. So I'm going to pass both of these inside of my values. So I'm saying keep track of setText, and but these are going to be my props, and I keep track of it. Okay, now I'm going to close this. So right now, as you can see, when I return something, I open this tag and I close it. Okay, so if I want to run this function and every time it's going to be open and closed by itself, then I can't write anything in the middle, right? If I want to write anything in the middle, I have to actually write it in this function. But there is a special props called children. And when I write that children and I call it here, then it will know that whatever elements, whatever is coming between these two or text provider components is going to be considered children. So that means they all have access to this value that's coming from the provider. Okay, so now I created my provider function. Now everything else is going to be same as usual. There's going to be small differences. I'm going to talk about it here. The first one, I'm going to export and I'm going to say context export context comp1 for the first one, and this is going to be a function. And this function is going to need a prop. I'm going to say there is a constant. I'm going to take this text and I put it in the curly braces because this text is coming from that object. And this is a very interesting thing that happened here. I'm taking the text, and the way that I'm going to access this text is by accessing the object that I created, because all of these information, all of these props are going to be available inside of my context object under the provider, because provider have received all of these values. So the way that I'm going to access these values is by a hook called, sorry, what did I do here? Is by a hook called useContext. So useContext is going to grab those values for me. I'm going to say use this hook on this object that I created. Okay, so useContext will go inside of the object that I created and it will look for something called text, or here under the value, I have this text. So it's going to grab it from there and it's going to create another constant called text here for me. And it's going to assign whatever value this text has to this new text that has been created. Okay, and then I'm going to return, why do I have a problem here? Oh, this one I have to close. Also, I need a function here. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing. Right now, I have received my props this way, and then I'm going to do the same thing that I was doing here. I'm just going to return a render status. I'm going to return a render status, and it's going to change to whatever this value of text is. I'm going to create another one of these component here, and that is going to be context component 2. For this one, I'm going to receive the same thing again. I'm going to create a constant called text, and then from useContext, from the object of the context that I use the useContext hook to go inside of the object that I created, and I'm going to grab this text and I'm going to assign it to the value of this constant that I created. So this one means both the text from the object, and also it will create another constant called text, and it will have the same value as whatever this text is. So now I have created component 1, component 2, and I did the render status, and the text is going here, and now I need my button. I am going to export. This function is going to be context button, and I need to pass the prop somehow. This time, I don't want text, I want set text. So I'm going to say I'm going to create a const which is called set text, and also I want to access the set text from this object. And the way that I'm going to grab it is going to be with a hook called useContext. So text context, the object, and useContext is going to grab the values for me, and it's going to grab the set text for me. And then again, I need to return something. My return is going to be the same return as the previous one. And the difference here is that whenever I'm calling the function button handler, it's going to do this. It's going to grab set text function, and it's going to say re-rendered from context. Missing semicolon. I made a mistake here. So that is going to be const button handler. That's the expression. It's going to equal to this function. It's going to equal to this function. So now everything is good. I'm going to save it again. Oh, so apparently I cannot import in the middle. Apparently the import is supposed to happen at the top. I'm gonna take this off, and I'm going to put it here. Save again. Okay, we're good now. So now I'm going to app.js, and I'm going to call all of this. I put export for them, right? Export, 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 export. Okay, yeah. Things that we're gonna get, one is the text provider, the next one is context comp1, and then we have context comp2 and context button. Okay, so I import all of those from Exercise7, and now look how different this is. I'm going to say Exercise7 without context, and then I'm going to create another H2 down here, and I am going to say Exercise7 with context. And then under here, this is the interesting thing. We're going to write the text provider, which we said all of our values are going to be in there. And then inside, I am going to use text provider, and inside of this text provider, it's going to be all the children. So whatever is inside of these, whatever element that is inside of these text provider is going to have access to all of the values that text provider has. So now I'm going to call my component 1, context component 1. So now I don't need to pass anything to it because text provider has it. And I have context comp2, again, the same thing. And even that I have to change a different thing to the button context, again, I still don't need to pass any props. So this is way cleaner. Here, I have to send props for all of them. Here, I just call the function name, and I don't need to pass any props to it. I can call them 100 times, and I don't need to pass props to any of them. Because as long as they are in between text provider, they have access to both text and set text, and they can access it based on whatever has defined inside of the component. So now I'm going to say that when I go back here, there's no values a React tiled. Oh, okay. So what I did here is everywhere that I wanted to create a div, I created div. Why? Oh, that I made a mistake here. I don't know when this happened. I'm not supposed to pass anything to create context. Create context by itself is going to create an object from context or a context object for me. And then I'm going to assign it here. Children is only going to be passed in text provider because I'm just trying to say, even though this tag opens and closes here, but I want you to consider everything that is in between them. And these children are going to refer to those elements. Okay, so here, when I'm using text provider, I'm supposed to pass children. Here is where I'm supposed to pass children, because then this children is going to be used here. So that was a mistake. This will create the object, and this will use the provider from that object, and the provider would keep all of the values that can pass to the other elements that are children between the tags of this function. So the props are going to be lowercase. I made a mistake here. So most of the children are going to be lowercase now. It should be good. Okay, it showed up. So now it says no render from context, and then when I render, it says re-rendered from context. So again, no render from context. When I re-render, it's going to be rendered from context. So let's quickly go through it again. What we're doing here is, first of all, we're going to use it without context. So whenever you use it without context, you're supposed to pass props to each one of these individually. And since we are manually passing the props to each one of the components, mistakes might happen. And generally, this is the better practice to use context. And then when we're going to use context, we need to import use context, create context, use a state, and children. Do I need children? I do not need children. The idea here is that I'm not going to pass the props manually anymore, but all of the values that I need is going to be inside of the text provider, and this text provider can provide all of the props for whatever is in between, whatever element that is in between them. That is as simple as that. And then when we are going here, I have to, first of all, I have to create an object of context. The way that I'm creating the context object is with create context. And then that object, I named it text context. And then in order to use text context, I need to create a function. And I named this function text provider. The text provider has a tag in it. And this tag, text context dot provider, and that will receive a prop that have all of the values, and whatever value that you want to pass to all of those elements that are coming as children of this function or this component are going to be set in the value. And then some of the components are going to use the text, some of them are going to use set text, it doesn't matter. So what you return is basically this element, this component. And then I am passing children here. What children as a prop mean is that all of the elements that are coming in between these two tags. So all of these functions that I have created, when I call them in app.js, are going to be considered the children of text context provider. And then since this is going to update the props, the whole purpose of it is to update the props or give the props, you need to create a user state here. And so this user state is going to keep track of props being changed, and it's going to re-render. So in order for us to use this user state, we're going to have a variable which is called text, and then we're going to have a function that is called set text. In order to update the text, you're supposed to use set text. So then it will be tracked, and then I'm creating these functions that are very similar to no context function. And the way that I am receiving the information, the values from each one of these, from the values of a provider, it's going to be this way. So I say I want to look at the text of this function, and I am going to pass it. I'm going to pass that object that I created, the context object that I have, to the hook called useContext, and useContext is going to grab all of the values, and I say I want the value of text, and then I'm going to create a variable, a constant called text, and I'm going to save whatever value that useContext was able to get from this object. And that is going to be this value. And then same happens in this function. And then in the last function, I'm going to have a button. So whenever this button is clicked, I'm going to have a function here that's going to run. So on click, I'm going to run this function. And for this one, I'm going to receive the function from useState, which is setText. After I receive the setText from the text context, I am going to set the text to the new value that I want to set. And then whenever set text get a new value, it's going to update text. So that is the reason that these ones are getting re-rendered with the new value.